What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today's video is continuing on with cybersecurity. This is the course 1, module 3. Alright, so basically they talked about security frameworks and controls. From a big picture, basically it's like when alerts increase, security analysts don't react like randomly, right? They want to do things like identify the critical assets and risk, apply security framework, implement security control, and then continuously monitor and improve. So this is how security stays like scalable and repeatable. All right, so what are security frameworks? So they are basically guidelines used to build plans that mitigate risk, protect data and privacy, support compliance and laws and regulations. Frameworks create like a structured security life cycle, so a living system of policy, standards, procedures, continuous improvement. They help organizations basically protect PII, secure financial data, identify weaknesses, manage like organizational risk, and then align security with basically business goals. And then, so the security life cycle is not like a one-time thing. It involves as like threats, laws, or business goal change. And so frameworks provide the structure to manage this evolution. And what we have here is basically the 4 core components of security framework. And they are identify and document security goals. So this is basically, it defines what the organization wants to achieve. So example like identifying where current systems are out of compliance, Second, set guidelines to achieve goals. This is where you create rules and policies that guide behavior. An example would be like policies for handling user data requests or rules for data access, storage, and deletion. So this turns goals into like an actionable guidance. 3, implement security processes. So this one puts policies into like basically the real world practice. So for example, let's say you're like designing a procedure for like user data deletion, profile updates, or verify identity requests. This is where security becomes operational. And finally, we have monitor and I did not spell that right. That should be monitor and communication results. So this part this part is basically where you track effectiveness and report issues. So an example would be monitoring internal networks, reporting compliance related risks to management. Basically, if you don't have any monitoring, then there's no accountability. Okay, so why framework sort of like matters for analysts? It allows analysts to basically work consistently with the security team, understand why tasks exist, and collaborate across like departments, and then support long-term security goals. So you're basically sort of like understanding the frameworks explains like why you're doing what you're doing. What are security controls? Security controls are specific safeguards used to reduce individual risk. So framework means plan, control means action. And for example of the security control is, let's say, a policy where employees must complete a privacy training. Control would be like software that like assigns the training, tracks the completion, flags compliance. And so controls basically ensure that policies are actually followed. Okay. Next up, they also talked about basically the CIA triad and NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF. So security professionals don't really like guess how to protect the systems. They rely on things like the foundational principle, which is the CIA triad, and the established framework, which is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Okay. Like I meant, and together these help organization identify assets, manage risk, and protect users. So the CIA triad, which is the foundational model, is the core model used to evaluate security risk and policy decisions. So again, it's the confidentiality, integrity, availability, like things I already mentioned before. But just to make sure, confidentiality is enforced like through access control, permissions, authentication. It basically ensures only authorized user can access the data. Integrity means you want to make sure the data is correct, authentic, and reliable. Availability is basically ensures authorized user can access the data when needed, and it protect against like downtime or service disruption. Okay, so what is an asset? I think I mentioned this before. An asset is anything that has value to an organization. It is determined by basically the cost and risk impact. So an example, database with social security numbers. It has a high value asset, so it needs a strong control. Public news website, it has a lower risk, so fewer control. Okay, so NIST CFS, it's developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It is voluntary, widely adopted, it's used as a baseline for managing cybersecurity risk. What it does provide is basically the standards, guidelines, and practices. It helps organizations like manage whether it's long-term or short-term risk, protect critical assets, and it aligns security with business goals. Risk, threat actors, and framework. So security professionals must consider basically the threat actors' motivations, asset values, and the access level. So let's take a high-risk example, which is disgruntled employees. They already have access and know where sensitive data lives. So how risk is reduced, you want to apply availability plus access control principles, ensure that employees can access only what they needed, and use framework-based policy to enforce limits. Let's see. Yeah. And one more thing. So why diversity matters in security is something they also mentioned, is that threat actors come from all over the world, and diverse teams can spot patterns separately and faster, understand attackers' intention better, and improve risk mitigation. All right. So controls, framework, and compliance. Basically, security works when principle, framework, control, and laws all support each other, right? So think of it as like the CIA triad to framework to control to compliances, like, right? Each layer reinforces like basically the next. And so what you have to think is, and like I already mentioned with the CIA triad, security control, the security framework as well, compliances. Compliances are following internal standards, external laws, and regulation, things like that. Okay, so on this part, which would be the key frameworks, control, and regulations that you need to sort of like recognize. So what we have is the NIST, US based, by the way, it's voluntary. So we have the CFS, and the CFS is the baseline, it's like cybersecurity risk management. The RMF is risk-based approach for system security. So more alignment equals lower risk. FERC, NERC, critical infrastructure, applies to power grid and electricity organizations. So this requires like incident preparation, reporting, compliance with the CIP standards. And this this is basically the national infrastructure protection. The FedRAMP, which is, FedRAMP. This is the US federal standard for like cloud services. So it standardizes security assessment, authorization, continuous monitoring, This is where it's basically being used by like the government or like the cloud providers. So FedRAMP. CIS is Center for Internet Security. It's nonprofit. It provides actionable security control. Helps organizations basically harden the system, respond to incidents. And they mentioned that it's very practical and widely used. Here is the GDPR for EU GDPR, which is the European Union. So this protects the EU's like residents' personal data. It requires transparency, user data rights, breach notification within 72 hours, heavy fines for non-compliances. PCI DSS. This applies to organizations that handles credit cards. So the goal is basically reduce credit card frauds, and then it covers like storage, processing, transmission of card data. HIPAA, which is HIPAA, these are U.S. healthcare, protects protected health information, which is PHI. It's basically governed by privacy rule, security rule, breach notification rule. ISO, which is international standards, so global standards for basically technology management and processes, and it improves like efficiencies, consistency, cross-boarding operations. Finally, we have SOC 1 and SOC 2 for AICPA. This is audit-based report, focuses on user access, risk, financial compliances, and it covers the confidentiality, integrity, availability, privacy, and security. So failures can lead to fraud. All right. And then they moved on to, after all of that, they moved on to like the ethical part, right? So ethical concept that guides security decisions. In a way, think that cybersecurity isn't just always about technical, it's also about like legal and ethical, right? Security professionals must protect the system without breaking the law, and then safeguard people's like privacy and avoid action that could escalate like harm. So ethical is guys on like how you respond to the attacks. They obviously mentioned that ethics and counterattacks, so hacking back. When they talked about that from a U.S. standpoint, counterattacks are illegal, and that's because there are laws like Computer Frauds and Abuse Act from 1986, Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act from 2015, and then like counterattacks are basically viewed as a vigilantism, I think that's how you say it, which is acting as law enforcement without the authority. So just think of it as like you're doing a citizen arrest even though you're not the police. You can do that, but there are certain things that you can't like do, depending on like the law, I guess. I don't know too much about that, but I guess that was just sort of like an example. You're acting like you're acting as like a law enforcement, but you don't have the authority to. Now, the risk for counterattacks are basically there might be legal consequences, additional damage, international conflict if the attacker is state-sponsored. Only authorized like federal or military personnel can counterattack. From an international standpoint, which is the ICJ guidance, the International Court of Justice allows counterattack only if all conditions are met. Which is one, only affects the original attacker, is a direct request to stop, does not escalate the situation, and the effects can be reversed. But because these conditions are really hard to like guarantee, most organizations do not do counterattacks. Because if you really think about it, when you do a counterattack, it usually makes the situation worse and not really better. Unless you're just that good, obviously. Now, why defense is the ethical choice? Well, obviously, because counterattacks are risky and often illegal, the security field relies mostly on the framework control and principles like the CIA triad, because these help protect organizations without having to violate the laws and ethics. So, defense is always better. Okay, so ethical principles in cybersecurity. We have the confidentiality ethical, which is like from the ethical view. So only authorized users should access data. Ethically means respecting privacy, safeguard sensitive information, avoiding unnecessary exposure. Privacy protection. So security professionals have an ethical obligation to protect personal data. So types of data like the PII, which is just phone, name, address, all the simple stuff. And then the SPII, so social security, so credit card, or like medical data, for another example. Ethical responsibilities are basically for like securing the private data, identifying vulnerabilities, managing risk, and then aligning security with business goals still. Okay, so laws and professional responsibility. Laws are enforceable rules set by government bodies. As a security professional, you must remain unbiased, act honestly and responsibly, follow evidence, not assumption, and then respect laws at all times. Ethical expectations for security professionals. You are basically expected to be transparent and fair, stay informed about laws and threat, continuously improve your skill, and then act in the best interest of people and organizations, not for yourself. Ethical plus legal examples, so HIPAA, HIPAA. So we're using HIPAA as an example. HIPAA protects the protected health information, PHI. Sharing PHI without consent is illegal, and if a breach occurs, patient must be informed about it, and then the organization must act ethically and legally. So ethic plus law work together, not separately. And that is basically it. So a good security professional. So when with the video they talked about, they basically say that a good security professional are always about defense and not retaliate, protect people, not egos, and then follow ethics even when tempted to fight back. Okay? And that is basically it for the module 3. And now I'm going to go watch module 4. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.